Over the past year, yeah, we are recording the session. But yeah, over the past year, I have worked with the IED and with ICAT on 2 studies focusing on non-economic loss and damage, both of them in Bangladesh. I'm organizing this session together with Ben Wilson from SCIAF, the Scottish Catholic International Aid Fund. And we are going to start with 3 presentations by researchers. We have Afsara from ICAT, who will present about a study in Bangladesh. We have Mary Lacey from the University of Queensland, and she'll present a study from Fiji. And we have Julius from CISONEC Malawi, and he will present a study from Malawi. So these have all been conducted in the past year, and they've all conducted studies in their respective countries. So they will do a 5 to 7 minute presentation. After, I will moderate a panel discussion with 3 researchers. And finally, Ben Wilson from SCIAF will guide a Q&A session in which you all can ask questions. So that's the structure of this conference, of this session. And we're also aiming to create some knowledge materials out of this, so you can read about it after as well. I think it would be good if Afsara, you can present first. Would that be okay? Yeah, yes, let me share the screen then. Afsara and I have worked together on a project. So yes, share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want, you can just start.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dawe, and really looking forward to the session. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning from wherever you're joining us today from. My name is Afsara Mirza, and I'm currently working as a research officer at ICAT. So we had the opportunity to work together on a value-based approach to addressing loss and damages. And this was a case study in Durgapur Upazila, Netrokona district. Next slide, please, Dawe. The research was conducted in Netrokona Upazila in the north-central part of Bangladesh. As you can see in the map, it's in the very north-central part where we have given an arrow. And we chose this location because it was under research, and at the same time, this area seemed to be affected by flood last summer in 2021. At the same time, we had the opportunity to analyze 3 villages from this union, from 3 unions from this village to ensure the inclusion of different cultural groups, because we had the chance to really get an overview of Hindi communities, of Muslim communities, but also indigenous communities and Christian communities at the same time. Next slide, please. The research has 4 phases, as you can see at first, and this was done in the span of 3 field trips, starting from November to January. And at first, we really tried to see the context of the area, like, what are the slow or rapid onset event that these communities are facing. And then we try to go to values and then impact, and then how they're addressing this loss and damages. Next slide, please. So this is a hazard timeline that you can see, and this is a view from a sudden onset, and this was really created in a very participatory method, where we sat with the community in a focus group discussion way, and there was chart papers and there was markers. We tried to put the markers later after we drew the lines with the help of the community with pencils, so that we give them the right to really draw the hazard timeline. And this was done in a 3 focus group discussion, 1 in every village, as we said that we did this research in 3 villages. So we had the chance to do 3 hazard timeline and really accumulate it together. And this is an overall picture. And this is a timeline from 1998 to 2022. And this is a wide range of hazards, the main one being flooding, at the same time river erosion and also drought. But the major floods were seen to be happen in 1998 and also 2004, 2014, and also 2022. And this was also rapid like riverbank erosion was also a major issue that was flagged while doing the hazard timeline. Next slide, please. And this was also a timeline that we used. The same time frame was used, and this was more for the slow onset event. For example, we saw that there was the drought was increasing. Sorry, at the same time, like the rainfall was changing at a higher degree since 1998 to 2022. Summers were getting more hotter and temperature was increasing, which had an effect on the agriculture but also the livelihood. Next slide, please. And here we also tried to do a seasonal calendar with the community, because these communities are very I would say relied on agriculture or farming. So we really asked them about the rainfall and the temperature increase, especially in 2022 and 1998, so that we can see the changes, the drastic changes that took place between these 20 years of time span. And we saw that temperature was increasing in all the months, especially in summer. The summers were getting hotter, and rainfall was also increasing. Next slide, please. Here you can see that this is like a hazard and vulnerability map, and this was also done in a very participatory way, as we know that the community, since they reside in that area, they know their community well, right? They know where the shopping, where the bazaar is, where they can get the daily essentials. They also know where the mosque is, where the temple is, and where the schools is. So the major infrastructure, these were highlighted by the community. And here you can see that we did this in all the research location, but this is mainly for the Kulagora Union. The blue one is the river, the green is the agriculture, and the red triangles that you can see, they're the houses. But you see that the riverbank erosion, right? How much it impacted the community. At the same time, for example, some of the buildings were lost. The banyan tree, which really held a significant cultural and also like a religious value for the Hindi community, it was also lost. Next slide, please. So here, we tried to see the values part, right? So what do the community really value? And here, instead of using the predetermined types of values of non-economic loss and damage that we normally see in the IPCC report, we try to work with the participants to create a set of local values. Next slide, please. And here you can see that when I talk about values, this is the definition that we really incorporated in our research, and we use the concept of lived values. Next slide, please. So we had the opportunity to do 28 interviews, where we asked everyone to describe that what they do in a typical day, like what they value in their lives, what is the most important. And we got 75 values, right? When we asked that what they value the most, from the morning to the time they go to the bed. And that's what left us with 75 values. But in 6 focus groups, we asked the participants that what they thought, that does this value really align with what they're thinking, or how they really perceive these values. And then we could change it, add or split and merge it. And then we tried to have like 10 substantial values, which were really defined and taken into account by the community. Next slide, please.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm just gonna go quick. We're already at 5 minutes, so a bit quicker
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, it's going great. Sorry.
Sounds good. Okay. And these are the 10 major values that you can see, mostly non-economic, but when we talk about development, the economic aspect comes into picture. Next slide, please. I will just give this, and next slide, please, Dawi. So here you can see that you can see in the diagram that we have the 10 values, right? But we tried to differentiate it by how women is looking into a value. For example, when it comes to mental health, women tends to value mental health more, while indigenous cultures, they tend to value culture more, while younger people, they tend to value education more. Next slide, please. So at the last, in the last field trip, we tried to look at the addressing part, right? So how communities will address this loss and damage that they're facing, but which is so or interlinked with these values. Next slide, please. So these through the 32 interviews, we tried to look at the existing and wished response. When I say about existing, it means that, for example, when some Hindi communities, they cannot grow flour due to drought or temperature increase, they tend to buy flowers, or they tend to lend flowers from other communities. But for example, the communities also said that these are the list of wish response that they really look forward to, and the most key one that was highlighted was the structural improvement of the society, such as electricity, job opportunities, roads. Next slide, please. And this was a debriefing session. So since we worked in 3 villages, we tried to accumulate the values, right, and how they want to address these values. But at the same time, we tried to show the results in a chart formation, where we tried to share them, that these are the problems that you're facing, and these are the values that are being most affected, and this is how you want to respond to it. So this was part of a debrief session, and this is a picture that you can see. Thank you so much. It was lovely sharing my thoughts and this research with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, Afsara. That was a really nice presentation. I see there are some comments in the chat, but maybe it's good to leave them for the end for the Q&A session. I think that will be easier.
Sure.
I saw that Julius, you entered now. Would you be able to already present?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I can present now. I think I shared some slides with Ben Iver.
Hi, Julius. So yeah, Dawi, I shared Julius's slides to your email, if you're able to share them centrally.
Okay, this will take a bit. So maybe, can you, because I have to look them up, maybe it's then easier for Mare or Lacey. If you go first, would that be possible, Mare?
Yes, sure. Will you share the slide?
Okay, yes, same thing. Let me pull up the slides. Yeah, I can. I saw them in my email this morning. So I will look them up. Yes, I have them here. Great. Yes, let me share my screen. Share. Can you see them?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so yeah, you can go, Mare. Thank you.
Thank you. Bula Vinaka from Fiji and the Pacific. I'm Mary, and I'm here to present on our project that was undertaken in Fiji with regards to loss and damage. Can we move to the first slide, please? Thank you. So basically, the Pacific Island nations, they've experienced, periodic changes in climate change that, that have affected their well-being, their livelihoods, their economy for decades. And there is no denying, that these threats, are caused by rising sea levels, coastal erosion, inundations, cyclones, flash floods, and the list goes on. While the Pacific people have been adapting to this changing climate, further, I repeat, further adaptation efforts will be required, as the effects of climate change intensifies. What matters most to people, to be worth preserving and protecting, will determine how effective and legitimate the adaptation will be. So there is a need to shift the attention, away from that exclusive focus on economic material values, to a more deeper understanding of what climate change means for any society. Next, please. Our research case study, our research site is Fiji, and it's a small island state. Fiji is particularly impacted by climate change. Many of our traditional communities, our rural communities, and our daily economic and social activities, they are located and based around our coastline and nature. So, climate change has caused, threats. And if sufficient action is not taken to reduce these impacts, and if adaptation is not possible, these kind of impacts can lead to homes becoming uninhabitable and food plantations destroyed, drinking and water sources contaminated, and even forcing the many, many communities to relocate. Next. In Fiji, we undertook a fieldwork in 3 case study areas. So the first area that we did our fieldwork in is Tongoru settlement. This case study is very unique because it's a non-indigenous community. In the Pacific and in Fiji, the focus has always been on indigenous community. But we know now that climate change does not discriminate indigenous or non-indigenous. So this case study is very unique. So if you see in the images, Tongoru is an indigenous community. It's been facing significant coastal impacts in the form of coastal erosion, tidal inundation, saltwater intrusion. But one of the most poignant impacts of coastal erosion and flooding in this community is the image on C and D. In C, you'll see that's their graveyard. That's low tide. And the image in D, that is their graveyard underwater at high tide. Every time these people of Tongoru, every time they look out to the graveyard and they see the graveyard underwater and just the tip of the headstone they can see, it always brings tears to their eyes. Next, please. Our second site is Sese village, also in Fiji. Like Tongoru, Sese is an indigenous community, but like Tongoru, it also faces climate change impacts. If you look at the first image, there's severe coastal erosion. And the other image shows a gravesite, a graveyard, a gravesite that has been submerged due to a sea level rise and tidal inundation. So for the people of Sese, like Tongoru, whenever they see the sea wash over their graves, they cry because, they always say that, climate change is not only affecting the people who are alive, but it's also affecting people who have passed on. Next, please. And our last site is Vunisavisavi village. This is another indigenous community in Fiji. For Vunisavisavi, there is evidence of tidal inundation. king tides. They've been experiencing floods for the last 3 decades. And recently, they've noticed that the floods have become even more intense and more frequent. Their streams that they use to collect their fresh water has now been contaminated due to saltwater intrusion. During our field visitation, the villagers informed us that they had been told to relocate, but they choose to stay. Why? Because this village site is the home of their first paramount chief. Their obligation, their allegiance, their loyalty to the chief has made them to choose to stay in a place that is vulnerable to climate and disaster-related risks. So if you look at those images, the one on your left, that is the village ground. Crab holes everywhere. And on your right, that is also another house. This house, even though, you know, when it's a normal high tide, the water comes to the house, to the bottom of the house, but they still choose to remain there and continue to invest in improving their house. Next slide. Value-based approach. I have pictures there, images there of myself going into these 3 settlements and administering this value-based approach. First of all, you know, we had a consensus with our partners from the Cook Islands, from and Vanuatu, where we compiled these 20 cards, value cards, which were compiled and which illustrated 20 values from a Pacific context. So you'll see in the pictures, those are cards, 20 cards of which reflected the values. The people, the participants, they were asked to rank those cards from the most value, what they valued most, to the least value. After that, the people identified, you know, extreme weather events that they experienced or their household experienced and what they did to administer or to address those impacts. And for the actions that did not work, you know, why didn't they work? And they had to suggest the best way to protect those values and the type of support needed to do so. From my experience using this value-based approach, going into these communities, I realized that it invoked emotional, you know, response from the participants, you know, by reflecting on what they value, and, you know, they could share their experiences more clearly. You know, they would often cry, you know, as they told their stories. I realized that when you center, or we realize, our group realized, when you center, you know, what you value, it can be an effective way of understanding non-economic loss and damage. You know, it helped people to open up and share their thoughts, their feelings and perspectives. And, you know, and they speak about their own unique experiences and how they affected them, you know, personally. If you look at the first picture on Tongoru settlement, I want to point out that when we were carrying out this activity, you know, these value cards had drawings and it was also translated in Fijian. So one thing important to point out, when I was sharing it, we were discussing and having this conversation with the participants, it captured the attention of the children. The children came also in that discussion, in that space, which is important because the children, the future generation, it will help them prepare, you know, for further climate change impacts in the future. So I wanted to share that point. And yes, and those are the pictures. So you have the first one in Tongoru and the one with the man in Sese village and the lady in Vunisavisavi. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. That was really nice. Thank you for the great use of making photos and explaining the value cards. Yeah, that was really great. So we will go to Julius now. I will look for the presentation, Julius. In the meantime, would you be comfortable to tell us something about Storm Freddy? I just heard from Ben that you might be able to talk about this a bit more to show us what's going on in Malawi at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. I can also share the slides from this side if you don't have them, but I think you can do that if you have them ready. While you're searching, Malawi and Mozambique, of course, they're being at the moment we're being impacted by the cyclone Freddy, which is started spinning 2 days ago and still spinning, but it's expected to retract by end of today or tomorrow. This is one of the most dangerous cyclones with very high speeds of up over 200 kilometers per hour. And at the moment, by 24 hours spinning yesterday, I think we're talking about over 100 deaths and also a lot of damage to property in 6 districts in the country. And we've seen our president declaring a state of disaster yesterday. And today, still there's heavy rainfall and a lot of winds in the southern region. And we still have some properties getting destroyed in some of the districts. And I think the rescue teams are still counting the number of people that are missing, and still the death toll is rising. So I think that's the situation at the moment. And I'm actually close at one of the districts. After the meeting we are having, we will be driving down to some of the places to just appreciate what's the situation like. So I think that's what I can say. But it's not a rosy situation. Everyone is getting worried. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Julius, for explaining it a bit more to us. Yeah, I pulled up the slides. Do you see them now?
Yes. Okay. So, I think I'll take 5 minutes to explain. Thank you. So I think on the next slide. So my name is Julius Ngoma, working as coordinator for Civil Society Network on Climate Change in Malawi, but I also wear several hats, supporting the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance and some other networks as well. But in Malawi, I think for the sake of this presentation, we've been working with the partners in Malawi with the Scottish government funding. You remember I think COP26, the Scottish government actually announced a $2 million pledge or commitment to loss and damage. And through the work that we've been doing with the partners, SCIAF, TROCRA, and others on the ground, I think I'll mention in the next slides, we were able to actually tap into these resources. The issue was to work with the Scottish government to ensure that we, from the funding that was committed, we also help in trying to support the understanding on loss and damage, including how loss and damage can be quantified in different elements. One of the critical issues was about how do we quantify non-economic loss and damage. So I think this project was all about action research, trying to work with the communities, see how they are being affected by different climate change events, how they are taking action, and also how we can assist in terms of ensuring that we learn from what they are doing, and then also contribute to the global processes of identifying, understanding this issue of loss and damage, but also how to quantify some of the losses and damages, especially the non-economic loss and damage. So we're working with CAD, which is Churches Action Relief and Development, CADECOM, which is a Caritas institution in Malawi, but also TROGRA. Next slide. So we, as CISONEG, part of this project, our approach was to try to do a number of studies to understand different elements. One of the critical issues is what I've mentioned already, to understand how to quantify, or methodologies on quantifying non-economic loss and damage. So we had to do simple research where we had to do a lot of reviews, a desk review, just to understand what is there on the in the literature, but also try to get information from the key informants on how NED can be quantified, what are some of the methodologies that are existing, but also the proxies that can be used to identify or quantify non-economic loss and damage. So we had to do a lot of focused discussions with the different stakeholders, but also case study analysis, just to understand what is there and what can be advocated. So next slide. A number of methodologies were actually identified. I think they were working with more than 5 non-economic loss and damage that we identified. But then what we did was to also just, I think for the sake of this presentation, I'll focus on 5, which we actually also had to understand. The first one was on loss of life as non-economic loss. And then what we found was that different methodologies exist, but I think what was more workable to us was the methodology that is being used by the insurance industry when trying to quantify or calculate life assurance. Of course, there are issues to do with ethical concerns around it, but we also understand the fact that to estimate, the value of life using these methodologies, it also will differ according to regions because of the risk of exposure, but also the exposure to climate risks, but also disasters. So that is something that we actually thought it's going to work. On the issue of loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, there are 2 methods: contingent evaluation, but also choice modeling could be workable in terms of calculating economic value of the ecosystem services. But when you want to work with these methodologies, then there are proxies which also may include the cost of enacting, for example, preventing programs to minimize climate change impacts, or using total foregone revenue as a result of loss of the biodiversity or ecosystem service. So next slide. Yeah, so we also try to understand what can be workable in terms of trying to quantify the loss of cultural heritage. Excuse me for the spelling there. So on the cultural heritage, we noted that cost benefits analysis methods could actually work in terms of ensuring that we quantify. So some of the workable proxies included the prominent 2, the willingness to pay value, but also willingness to accept by the community to actually on certain losses that they've encountered on the cultural heritage that they have. But at some point, you also can work with the foregone revenues to try to estimate what loss is there. This is, I think, almost similar to what to the methodologies that you can use to quantify forced migration as a loss, because cost-benefit analysis was also found to be one of the critical, methodologies, and you can work with proxies such as the willingness to pay by the community or willingness to accept, and the cost of enacting, you can also use the cost of enacting preventing programs to address the climate change impact as one of the proxies to help you to estimate the value of forced migration. And next slide. The final one was the disruption in economic activities. This one was come out very, straightforward because this is almost like you are estimating the value of an economic loss, because sometimes you already have an idea of what communities are doing, especially business, if they are running businesses or if they are running any other, maybe farming interventions, that you would actually be able to estimate what the value of that business that was lost. And workable proxies would also include the replacement cost of the assets that the communities have, or any person who was owning a business has. Value of the business that has been lost, and then indices used in vulnerability assessments can also help to quantify the disruption of economic activities. And on a more general term, as a final area that we looked at was on the general non-economic loss and damage, where we're talking about we found that there are specific assessments that can also be done. For example, there was a proposal or proposed method, a crude method that was suggested by NODAS in 2014, where the non-economic loss and damage are assumed to be equal to the 25% of the quantifiable loss and damage. So we, when you look at the methodologies that was being presented by NODAS, I think this implies that by adjusting 25%, upwards of any economic loss that have been determined, you should also be able to cover some of the non-economic loss and damage that could be encountered during an event. So finally, on the next slide, which is my last slide, was just to say that I think the study attempted to understand what methodologies are there, what proxies are there that we can also advocate for in terms of how we want also to quantify the non-economic loss and damage. Remember, even though we have quantification methods, most of them are actually directly linked to economic loss and damage. The excuse has always been that we are not able to quantify non-economic loss and damage because the methodologies are not there, the proxies are not there, but also it's very complicated. But moving forward, I think with these types of methodologies that are already existing, we should be able to support in the process of identifying, but also generating what could be workable or acceptable methodologies by everyone to actually try and help to quantify the non-economic loss and damage, because this aspect is actually a growing aspect. We cannot be neglected. We still need to find a way of how to quantify these losses. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you, Julius. I think we've seen two very different kinds of presentations today. The first two both took a values-based approach, focusing more on the intangible aspects and staying away from the quantifying part, while you, Julius, really try to quantify economic loss and damage, which is very hard. And so it's very interesting to see how you try to tackle this challenge. So let's start the panel discussion. We have a set of questions. I'm gonna prepare them here on my screen. I see that there are again messages in the chat. We'll answer those during the Q&A. Yes. So we've seen 3 presentations now, and they all have a little bit different perceptions of what non-economic loss and damage is and how you actually research non-economic loss and damage. But there's also a lot of synergies. The first question I want to ask is, this session is part of the Gobeshna conference, and Gobeshna is hosted by ICAT, and the theme this year is locally led adaptation. And we've heard that non-economic loss and damage can be very subjective, personal, and that it can differ by context. So the question is, how did you ensure that the voices of the participants in the study were properly heard? And maybe Sarah, you can start answering.
Sure, David. Thank you so much. I think that's a great question, since the theme of this conference is locally led adaptation, and I feel like in our research we also try to follow a locally led approach where we really talk with the community, learn about their lifestyle, right? When we ask about what they value the most from the time they wake up to the time they go to the bed, that's how we try to formulate the values, keeping in mind their perceptions, their likings, their dislikings, their emotions attached to it. That was the first thing that we tried to do. As well as, I would also like to say that during the focus group discussion, when we do the hazard timeline, right, we also tried to have their perception. We wanted that they help us to really build on this timeline, which goes 20 years back, to see the impact on their lifestyle. At the same time, one of the most important thing that we're doing in order to make sure that the voices of the participants are heard, we're trying to do some video stories that really allows people to tell their own story, because everyone's story is different, right? But when we do a video, it makes it more personalized, and oftentimes it's seen that we're not generalizing any data, but in most cases taking out a personal story which really resonates with their experiences, with the lived realities that they have. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you. Mara, do you have anything to add, or Julius?
Yes, thank you for that. In our research during the data collection, our main focus was creating an environment that enables the people to express their views freely. And the first thing that we did in order to create that space is we traditionally asked for their consent to be part of the project, to be part of that research. And then creating an environment, a safe one, because you're talking about values, personal issues, sensitive issues. So we wanted to create that space where they feel they could speak in confidence, and give their undivided attention. So, when it came to the discussion, we let them choose when and where to hold that discussion. And I think when we did that, when we took that into account, it allowed the people to openly speak and share their stories with us. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you. That's really nice. And I think we did similar things as well in Bangladesh, and it helped so much with gaining the connection and the confidence with the participant. Julius, do you have something to add as well?
Not necessarily, just to strengthen what my colleague has said. The two colleagues, I think our approach was also very unique in the sense that we were trying to do everything together with the communities, actually letting the communities to lead in terms of how we do different approaches or interventions within the program. So mostly it was learning from them, understanding what the perceptions are in terms of the different elements of the loss and damage. It's more especially on non-economic loss and damage, because beyond this, as we're trying to also do this research on methodologies, there were case studies that were actually being documented in the process, where communities were able to actually provide their own input into how, for example, you want to quantify, for example, loss of life, loss of economic and cultural heritage in their own community. So it was through that process that helped us to make sure that they are at the center stage. They're taking a center stage. You are learning from what is already existing on the ground, but also how they would want to do their interventions when given a chance. They want to design what loss and damage project will look like.
Yes, great. Thank you. And I think my next question ties into everything you've just spoke about, Julius and Mara and Sarah. But in the presentations, we saw that non-economic loss and damage also includes very sensitive and personal aspects of people's life, like, let's say, health complications, loss of life, mental health issues. And some of these parts are very sensitive to people. Some of these parts can be taboo in certain cultures. I know that in Bangladesh, we really struggled to talk about China ecological issues sometimes, because that's just not a topic people feel comfortable talking about. So researching non-economic loss and damage risks to make people uncomfortable and to bring up traumatic memories because you're talking about topics as loss. So my question is, how did you study try to minimize the risk of actually causing additional harm to participants by asking these sensitive questions? And maybe, Julius, if you want, you can start again.
Yeah, very right. And I think it's very it's not very easy for you to take that discussion to the communities, but I think on our end, we're also trying to work with communities that have gone through a lot of things already, and they were already, even before you even ask sensitive questions, they're already giving you their context in terms of what has been happening within their community. So I think for us, it was more or less easy, because we were dealing with the communities that have over and over again being affected, like communities in Zomba and communities in Sanje that the project was actually working in. Actually, it was in that context, but we tried to make sure that the kind of questioning, the kind of interaction has to be that interaction that brings the communities to give you their perspective, not in a way that you want to start, making them to think certain things, or maybe start to judge the way you want to, you want to engage them and get information from them, but to engage them in a way that they want to be part of, bringing out solutions to the problem that they have been experiencing so far.
Yes, great. Thank you. Mary Lacey or Afsara, do you have anything to add?
Sure, Dawi, I can just add one more thing, and I really agree with whatever Julius said prior to me. But one of the things that in our research we tried to do is that, since women residing in those villages especially Muslim women, or even Hindu women, they're very conservative, and they do not open up when it's a male interviewing them. So we try to make sure that a woman interviews a woman, another woman, and at the same time, especially when we talk about health, mental health issues, or any like menstrual health, hygiene management issues. But at the same time, one of the things that we also try to make sure is that before starting a key informant interview or focus group discussion, we try to inform that participant about what we are going to ask them about. For example, we try to inform that today's discussion will be based on the on the experiences that are related to, like, for example, like the floods and how it impacted your life, so that they have they already have that in mind. And one more thing is that, since we interviewed a lot of Muslim communities, so whenever it was time for them to pray, we tried to restrict ourselves from not taking their time during their prayer time, so respecting their values and their praying times, of course. Thank you.
Yes, great, thank you. Good. Oh yeah, Mary, you go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I totally agree with my two colleagues. From our end, I think, when you first and foremost, when you know that the project or the research is based on sensitive issues, proper planning is needed, timing, the space. And what we did, we also ran a test interview with a colleague and even family members, and even we got a representative from the provincial office just to test the questions with them to avoid insensitive or abrupt behavior during the actual discussion. And the other thing was, I mentioned earlier how when we talk about values with these with the people, we had women and even men shaken, crying, sobbing. And, when that happens, we try our best not to, just the interview, we cut short the interview and wrap it up. But, what we try and do, we let them know that, we'll stay and, we'll call someone else to come and see them. But we try to never leave anyone in the state of distress if those things come up and they are shaken, emotional. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you, Mary. That was really, really good insight. Okay, so we have case studies here from Fiji, Malawi, and Bangladesh, and these are all different countries in different parts of the world with distinct cultures. And we've heard that non-economic losses and damages can be very sensitive to culture and to local contexts. For example, mental health issues will be perceived differently in the global north and the global south. So I wonder, did you feel that participants' perceptions of certain topics or non-economic losses and damages was closely tied to the place where they're from? And maybe Mara, if you want, you can start.
Thank you. Yes, for sure. In Fiji, for Fijian communities, climate change is not only changing the land, the ocean, but it's also changing the meaning of land and ocean for the people. And for Fijians, land is seen as like this ancestral trust that's been passed down through generations, and thus it results in the in the formation of that strong cultural links and place attachment between people and their land. And if you look at the word land, if it's translated directly to English, it means dry land, a spot or a region. But for us in the Pacific, in Fiji, land means more than that. It's that interconnectedness of the natural environment, social kinship ties, ways of beings, spirituality, stewardship of place. So, when you're looking at these notions or these dimensions of the attachment to place, they are essential elements, to sustainable adaptation. In a Fijian context, this notion is essential to, to understanding the causes and the meaning of how the Fijian people respond to climate change. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, and I think your value cards also really show this, and I think your methodology for this is really attuned to the fact that everything changes by place. So, Julius, did you also have insights regarding this?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So the question is, the question is if you feel that people's perceptions vary to certain non-economic loss and damages as they are closely tied to the place where they're from. So, for example, as Mary just explained, the people in Fiji have a very special relationship to the ocean. So do you feel that this was also the case in Malawi?
Yeah, exactly. And just to strengthen what the last presenter said, and as I said, I think, for example, our intervention also focused on areas that you have some very indigenous communities, indigenous in the sense that these people have been there all along without before the time that we started having all these frequent and intense events. They were still there. They were still having some events happening, but they never were willing to actually move out of these places because they feel attached to such places. I think the government has tried to move some of the people in some of the areas within the region, but it has not been very possible because of the attachment that has been there. So the explanations, for example, were really and their perceptions were actually really attached to the value that they have to the places that they've been locating over the years, and actually that informed how we understood some of the elements. For example, the loss of cultural heritage that I was talking about actually was coming out very clearly because of the way people in the areas attach value to some of the things that they've lived with for so many years.
Yes, great. Thank you, Julius. Afsara, do you have something to add here as well?
Yeah, sure, Dawe. I would just like to add that, in our cases, we saw that, for example, like Muslim families, they tend to value like family more, right? Because it has more of like a cultural impact, but also how just the way they grew up. So in our cases, we saw that. When we talk about disasters or like slow or rapid onset events, especially like floods, um, they said that the first thing they thought about protecting or saving is their child, or their son, their daughters, and they also tend to value education more. But in other cases, we saw that mental health is still a taboo in those places, and it's not talked about so often. So for example, like the different mental health impacts such as PTSD or depression, these are mainly termed as stress, while for indigenous communities, we saw that they hold strong values to the culture. So for example, like simply like the way they have this relationship with nature, they tend to protect that so much. So the perception really varies across genders, but also the cultural dimension as well.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, Afsara. Yeah, and you just also you ended your little talk with saying that it also varies by gender, and that kind of overlaps with my next question, which is that if you look at past non-economic loss and damage assessments, participants are often treated as like one big homogeneous group, and people disregard the pre-existing vulnerabilities that come with gender, but also with class, with race. So I wonder, in all of your studies, how did you look at the different experience by these demographics or by these characteristics that people have, and how they coincide with the vulnerabilities they have? So did you look at gender? Did you look at income? Did you look at, for example, differences by culture? And maybe Mara, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So for our study, we we had these semi-structured interviews where we conducted, so we separated by gender. So we had the men, and then the women, the youths, and they range from different ages, from 20s to the 70s. Some of these, some of the women wanted to, they wanted discussion together, like a focus group, while some women didn't want that. They wanted individual. So we took that into account. We also interviewed the village headmen separately. And also in these communities, like for Tongoru, we tried to find out, these communities, they have been, at risk, vulnerable to climate risk. Some of them have been earmarked to relocate. Then there was some households in these villages, they chose to stay. So we also interviewed the ones who chose to stay and the ones who wanted to move. And in Bunisabi village, we interviewed the 4 families that had relocated. So, getting all these different groups and getting the insights and, just learnings from them, it actually, gave us a lot of rich data.
Yes, thank you. Sarah, do you have anything to add here?
Sure. Just to add with what Mary said, we also differentiated the results based on age group, also gender, but also culture group and location. Because since we had 3 village locations, as I mentioned, but when we look at these different aspects, right, in order to differentiate the results, we also see that different groups value different things differently, right? So for example, young people, they tend to value education more, while women, they tend to value mental health more because it's associated with peace and serenity, while indigenous groups, as I mentioned before in my conversation, they tend to value culture more. And in many cases, since they value this more, these are the things that are impacted more for them. But maybe we also have a lot of opportunity to also look at the income level in our next study. Thank you.
Yes, great, thank you. Julius, do you have something to add from your study as well in Malawi?
Not necessarily, because I think that has been captured very well by my 2 colleagues. I think when we're trying to do the studies, going into the communities, we made it possible that we had to interview different, groups of people by gender, but also age, and just to understand the different perspectives that they have at different levels, so that would inform how we, we also, make our conclusions on the different issues that we're trying to understand. So that's what I wanted to add. The different case studies that we also did were also varying according to the different, the differences we found in the communities, interviewing different groups of people, but also considering gender as well. Thank you.
Yes, great, thank you. And then Julius, I'll ask you the next question as well, which is, yeah, we see a huge difference in the 2 kinds of studies. I think Mara and Afsara, you really looked at values and the more intangible aspects of people's life, and Julius, you really try to quantify non-economic loss and damage. Would you be able, Julius, to explain a bit more why you think quantifying non-economic loss and damage is so important, and the challenges that come with it?
Yeah, I think, thank you for the question. And that actually, formed our premise. And I think when we're trying to do our thesis, it was actually in line with what the question that you've actually asked. Remember, I said when I was making the presentation that we noted that it's very easy, especially in Malawi, it's very easy for anyone to go on the ground when an event happens to to do, rapid assessments on economic related, on elements that can be quantified economically, and that leaves out a lot, this part of non-economic loss, because we just, present, we've seen, for example, governments and other, agencies just presenting figures in terms of numbers of people that have, been affected, lives that have been lost, but we've never gone to an extent of understanding what is the value of the life, for example, that has been lost. What is the value of, if you say 10 graveyards have gone, what is the value of that? What is the value of this, forest that has been, degraded because of, intense flooding and, torrential rain? So that to us was a bit of a challenge, because just understanding the numbers wouldn't mean anything, but we also need to be able to tell the story in the economic terms, so that we are able to compound the whole picture and then present the picture to everyone in terms of economics, the way we do with these economic losses and damages. But the only challenge that is there is the issue of subjectivity to how you can value these non-economic losses and damages. There are so many aspects that needs to be looked into when you are trying to do valuation of such non-economic losses and damages. It's not easy. You have to take into consideration so many things. It can also be very subjective, because using, for example, the methods that I was mentioning, let's say willingness to pay, would actually mean someone can give you their own perception on how they want, how they value a certain or particular, element that has been lost within the community. So it's the same thing that we're discussing in the previous question, to say when you ask different people in different genders or different categories of people, they will tell you what they value the most. And actually, when you want to do the cost-benefit analysis, or when you want to do this willingness to pay, kind of, assessments, you can get, different answers from the same question. So that's a very critical issue that, presents challenges when you want to consider valuing non-economic loss and damage. Thank you. I hope I addressed your question.
Yes, that was a great answer. Thank you, Julius. And Mara and Afsara, do you have anything to add on this from your studies?
Maybe just one thing, Dawe, that is that, I feel like it's important to really quantify, because then we would also understand the clarity of each value that we have found, so that we understand the importance of it. So when we have a number, we tend to value something more. So I feel like quantification is important, but one of the things I think that is also challenging when it comes to non-economic loss and damage is that, how the emotions are tied into it. So how do we quantify that? So I feel like there is a long way to go in terms of also creating a framework for quantifying this non-economic loss and damage. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Mara, do you want to add something as well? Or
yes, thank you. I think one way of addressing non-economic loss is to try and put a monetary figure on such loss, although this is controversial because of the nature of such losses, and also the question of who decides what this amount should be. And then monetary payment cannot, of course, right the moral wrong caused to these communities through the loss, but it could instead be understood as an attempt to try and address the impacts of the loss in the future. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you, Mara. And then I'll go on to my last question of the panel discussion, and after we can go into the Q&A. But yes, I wanted to end with the fact that loss and damage is becoming increasingly important within the UNFCCC and the COP meetings. So this year at COP27, we saw the design of the Loss and Damage Fund. And we hope, of course, the fund is now established. We hope, of course, that it will be operationalized very soon. So when it will get operationalized, how should this fund most effectively address non-economic loss and damage in your view? So yeah, Julius, would you feel comfortable starting again?
Yeah, it's an amazing question, and one thing I think we needs to happen is to ensure that we learn from what the existing financing frameworks have done, how they are being. I mean, within the UNFCCC, there are several other financing, mechanisms that have been created so far, and how they've been able to support different elements, adaptation, mitigation, and so on and so forth, and ensure that we learn from there to design a framework that should be able to address loss and damage in a very immediate and emergent way. With that, we have to learn on how, for example, what we're doing is try to understand what these economic and non-economic loss and damage would mean in a community, and then maybe try to also understand what kind of projects or programs can be, interventions can be implemented at the community level, so that these can be, supported. So I think having these two understandings, how a loss and damage project would look like and how that can be funded, I think this is a work of the transitional committee and others that should help us really to put forward a proposal of a structure that can be workable for us in the Global South.
Yes, thank you, Julius. Great answer, and I completely agree. Mara, would you have something to add here as well?
Yes, just to add on to Julius, I think I agree with him. First, we need to understand and identify what is loss and damage to these communities, identifying them, and then ask them from their perspective, their preference, their values, what support can we provide, or the funding can provide to address those losses. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Asa?
Sure. Thank you, Dawa. I think it's a great question. I think first we should really focus on the fact that how economic and non-economic loss and damage is very intertwined and not very different, because when we address something economic, the non-economic situation will get better, inevitably. For example, people, when communities will be able to afford education for their children, this will inevitably increase their knowledge, and at the same time the serenity, the peacefulness, and also take mental health to a better place. So we need to understand the interlinkage between economic and non-economic. But at the same time, in our research specifically, people tend to focus more on the structural aspirations that they want to see in their communities, or I would say the structural changes that they want to see in their communities. For example, having better access to schools or better access to healthcare. And at the same time, women were talking mainly that there is lack of job opportunity for women specifically. For example, there is no training centers, or no training facilities which is accessible. So any structural, I would say, societal changes can be very important to have a framework or define this fund for the longer term. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you, all three of you, to hear your perspectives on these wide range of questions. So that was the end of the panel discussion part, and now we'll go to the Q&A, which will be hosted by Ben Wilson from SkyF. Yes, so Ben, if you want to take the stage.
Thanks, Dewi. This has been an amazing and really rich discussion. So thank you to you and to all of the speakers. I think it's been incredibly valuable. Yeah, as Dewi said, my name is Ben Wilson. I'm the advocacy manager at SkyF. I work closely with Julius as part of a Scottish Government funded programme addressing loss and damage with communities impacted by extreme weather in recent years as a result of climate change. And of course, as Julius talked about earlier, those very same communities are experiencing even more extreme weather right now, and that will have a devastating economic and non-economic impact. So now is a chance for everyone here attending to ask questions or offer comments to the panel. We have about another 10 or 15 minutes left for this. So I think the best way to organise this would be if people simply use the raise hand function on your Zoom, and then I can invite you to make your comment and direct it either towards one or all of the panel members. So I put it over to the audience. Please do come ahead and ask questions and offer comment. I'm not seeing any raised hands yet. I might have to invite comment myself, but I'll just give it one more moment in case anyone wants to come in. Simon Anderson, I wonder if I could come to you. You've offered a few reflections in the chat, which I think were all really useful. I wonder if you would like to come off mute and maybe just share some of those reflections orally across the meeting.
Yes, thanks, Ben, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This has been a really interesting session, I must admit. I guess my main reflection is, whilst we're seeking to improve the way we understand non-economic loss and damage, we are really doing that because we want to add something to the ways that those people affected by non-economic loss and damage actually gain compensation, and that the climate injustices that they are facing are in one way or another reversed. So to do that, my question to the panelists is, who do we see as the users of the information that these different non-economic loss and damage needs assessments is generating? Who should be responding to what is being found out, and what can we do to make, to really improve the communication of what we're learning through these different processes, and share that with people who are in the position to make a difference?
Thank you, Simon. A really important question, I think. I wonder, any particular panel member would you like to come in and answer?
Sure, I can come in, Ben. I think that, whatever we're studying now or doing now, Simon, I think it's a great question, can be used by civil societies, but also community-based organizations. But this information needs to be translated in a more localized language. So, for example, one of the things that we did in our research is do the debrief session where we really make understand community the climate change aspect, but also tell that these are the challenges that you're facing. So really breaking something complicated into easy language for the communities, but also making sure that these documents are well read by policymakers, and also in our cases in Bangladesh by the ministries who are, for example, Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, for example, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, so that there is a downward accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Afsara. Mary or Julius, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just to to add to that intervention, I think at the moment it's the government which is leading, for example, processes that would mean engaging in rapid assessments to understand what, for example, the different impacts are in different communities, and that's for example in our case where we're trying to propose which methodologies can be used. I think it will also be very useful for these agencies like the government. For example, in Malawi, we usually come up with interagency assessments to do, for example, rapid assessments, but also even detailed assessments later on what has been, the impact of a certain extreme weather event. So I think it's a very valuable information for the government and all these agencies that work at that level of humanitarian assistance, to be able to also understand that they can also use such methodologies to enlighten the general populace on what, or even those who can take action on what have been the losses and damages within the communities. So the civil society are also there to even help communicate these, this type of information that we are generating, so that it reaches to those that should be able to take action. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Julius. Mary, is there anything you'd like to add on this question?
Yes, thank you, Ben. I think this information will be very useful for in the Fijian context. For Fiji, it would be the government and the donors, these are the implementing agencies. I think it's very important for them to be aware of such information, because it's so important that the values and the perspectives and the preferences of the people at the front line of climate and disaster risks needs to be acknowledged, and if this is taken on board, then the loss and damage that's been experienced by these people, they are basically people's values. So it's important that this information is at the hands of the government and the donors. Thank you.
Indeed, no, that's right. I think, and I think that relates quite nicely onto a question which I've just received in the chat from Mahmoud Kabir. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question to everyone?
Thanks, Ben. A really interesting conversation. I'm just curious to learn. I was thinking about the recognition of this value that we are talking about. Like, are the governments, and of course the donors as well, ready to recognize this alternative paradigm that we are proposing, and how far have we progressed in this regard, so that we could bring this up in our ongoing conversation with the donors and the governments, while any conversation on loss and damage takes place in various countries, especially in the context of Global South. What are the things that we could easily refer to that, well, this has been progress so far, and this is being recognized increasingly. So if there's any link or lead that we could refer to, thank you.
It helps me reflect on some work that the Scottish government is doing or trying to champion at the moment about what they call the well-being economy. And what you were answering just now, Mary, was making me think that actually, yeah, you're right. I mean, across the planet, global north, global south, there is a real mismatch between what policymakers value and what people in everyday life value. And that focus on the economic is really something which is endemic across all societies and is really reflected a lot in this discussion. I wonder, in answer to that question, maybe I'll come to you first, Mary, and then Julius, and maybe you, Dowie, now that Sarah has left. Do you see an appetite from the governments that you've been dealing with for reflecting on these non-economic means of assessment and valuing things?
Thank you, Ben. I think from our side, the government we need more and more research and value-based approaches into the effects or the risks that climate change and disaster has played or has done to our communities in Fiji. I don't think these implementing agencies have really grasped the importance or the acknowledgement of values, and we've seen that from past projects that have been implemented in Fiji, where there's just a rapid assessment. From a Western perspective, if we're looking at for example, in terms of addressing the impacts of climate change, like these loss and damages, when implementing agencies come in, the first thing they bring in is relocation. They just say relocate, but they fail to realize that for us in the Pacific and in Fiji, relocation, that concept is not how the Western perceive it. Like you just pack your bags and go. For us, it's more than that, and it's very difficult from a Western perspective to understand and comprehend the way Pacific Islanders think, our worldview. So I think it's very important that we have to acknowledge that, and I think from in my opinion, I think the government and its implementing agencies still lack that. They've got the money, they just come in, they've got the money, the funding for these projects, but I think they still lack that. There's still a gap of acknowledging our values, our perspectives. Yes.
Indeed, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And maybe I'll just quickly go to Julius and then I'll pass over to you, Dowie, and maybe you can wrap up as well when I come to you. Over to you, Julius. Do you have any reflections on this?
I think what we started is a very powerful process, which would actually eventually make the governments and other agencies to realize that they're missing something, as my colleague has said, in terms of understanding, but also recognizing the values in the communities, because as I said when I was responding to the other question, the rapid assessments that have been there are just to get those quick things, economic things that you would actually present a picture, but it leaves a lot in terms of what the communities would value in terms of their loss. So I think maybe moving forward, I know what we've done, for example, in Malawi with this work on non-economic loss and damage. It has already started to, move some things within the government to start realizing that. I think, for example, the post-disaster needs assessment that they do still lack on so many elements, and they need to now start realizing that, or trying to commit to even broaden the scope of the PDNA to even do other assessments that are related to non-economic loss and damage. So that's, I see this process as very powerful, and then could eventually help our governments and even the interagencies to be able to work or modify the way they're working, and also try to take on board some of the issues that are being raised under the non-economic loss and damage.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Julius. So we are now at time, so I'll pass over to Dowie maybe to address this question and then to wrap up. But thanks very much for everyone's participation. It's been a great session.
Yeah, I think in Bangladesh it's very similar to the other two countries. Bangladesh has historically faced with floods and cyclones for a long time, so there's a huge institutional networks and just institutions that deal with disaster, and they're just not ready to think about the intangible and the non-economic impacts on life. So yeah, there definitely needs to be a huge shift of mindset, but also just of policies in Bangladesh to properly address non-economic loss and damage. With that said, yes, we're at the end of the session. Thank you all so much for participating. I think there were 3 really great presentations, all showing different local contexts, all showing a little bit different methodologies, trying to tackle the important question of how do you quantify and how do you actually assess something that is so subjective. And thank you all for the comments. Yeah, Simon and Shobian, I see your comments, and they were really interesting to read during the session as well. We will, together with Skiev, publish a blog out of this. So we will bundle all the thoughts, all the perceptions, and communicate it in a blog. I see some comments now in the chat. I'll quickly read them. Yes, so Del, I see you saying that it's interesting to account for it in rapid assessments. Yeah, completely agree. But yeah, like Ben said, it's the end of the session, so we have to close for now. But yeah, thank you all so much for participating, and I'll have a good morning, afternoon, or evening.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Before we all leave, can we take a group photo? Can you kindly all turn on your cameras?
Oh yeah, okay. Let's see if everyone is here. Yes, we have people here. Yes.
It's done. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Great.
you.
Okay, then
Bye-bye.
we'll officially close the session. So thank you all for participating. Ciao.
Thank you.